Okay, let's go live now to Sarit Zehavi, a journalist who's served 15 years in the Israeli military. Sarit joins us live now from Israel. Sarit, I can't imagine what you and your people are dealing with over there right now. What is the current state of play? Have the attacks ceased or subsided temporarily?
I am the head of a research and education center. I'm not a journalist. I'm an expert to Israel security challenges, especially on the northern border. What we are facing here is something that we have never experienced before. Invasion of many hundreds of terrorists into Israel yesterday, which means 3,000 Israelis that were killed, 5,000 rockets that were launched from Gaza. These numbers are until 8 o'clock this morning. The news today is that Hezbollah joined in. Hezbollah launched anti-tank missile from a school in a town in South Lebanon against an IDF position in an area named Shiva Farms, Mount Dov, an area that Hezbollah is considered as Lebanese, but the Syrians considered as Syrian. So, it depends who you ask. But today, IDF controls this region since 1967. It's on top of the mountain, and this IDF position was hit. And later on, here and there, we hear that there is again and again rounds of fighting and shooting in the same area. We understand that the option to wide escalation on the Lebanese border as well is much more realistic than it used to be yesterday. And I guess that the political leadership of Israel now is busy with trying to still prevent it, even though everything that happened this morning on the Lebanese border, while the military level is making preparations, making sure that we will not be surprised. I can tell you I am 12 kilometers from the Lebanese border now. I can tell you that over here, civilians are working under the assumptions that we're going to have an escalation. Most of us prepare the shelters. Those of us who have shelters, not all of us have shelters, and many from the communities which are next to the border have left these communities and evacuated further south.
What does it mean this is unprecedented, at least in 50 years, so you've called it an invasion. How has that mobilized the Israeli people? You said that some are seeking out shelter, but most Israelis have been through military training of some description. Are they going back into immediate service, or are they just waiting to see whether they've called up or not?
Everybody's mobilized and everybody's recruited. Those were called by the army, almost all the men here. I can tell you from my center, half of the crew, everybody that is with the reserves was called. When I speak about those who are not with reserves, everybody is mobilized to help, to volunteer, whether it's blood contribution, assistance in the hospitals, assisting one another, sending equipment, civilian equipment, food to soldiers. These are just small examples that I saw from my social media. Israelis are now united against this front. The cost is high. We have many casualties, 300 people killed. It means that every Israeli knows somebody who was killed. And it doesn't matter, the political opinions now and the political crisis in Israel doesn't matter at these hours. We are all united together to fight this threat. And it's not going to, these terrorist organizations are not going to destroy the state of Israel, even though they did gain a high cost of casualties and Israelis dead.
Yeah, the Israeli Defense Force, of course, is quite formidable. The government has declared war. What's your interpretation of the statements from some other nations in your region? Qatar, Iraq, Iran, of course, Syria, have all suggested solidarity with Hamas and are blaming the Israelis for this circumstance. What do you think that's going to mean for the region?
Each of these countries that you mentioned have different story. In general, what I can say is that in the past few years, Iran had achievements in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, gaining military capabilities, wide military capabilities in those countries. In Yemen, half of Yemen is under the control of Iranian proxies. These capabilities were meant to be used against Israel one day, and they were preparing this campaign against Israel in the past year. And this is what we see now is an Iranian campaign. Let's not be mistaken. It's not for the Palestinian cause, and it's not on behalf or for the sake of the Palestinians. It's a radical campaign of the Shiite Islam of the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people, by the way, they're now trying to drag Lebanon there as well. As for the Arab countries, I don't expect too much from Qatar. They play both sides. And actually from the Arab state, what can I say? Even if I expected more, I understand in which neighborhood I live. And I hope that they will just stand still and let us do what we have to do, because these are their enemies as well.
Okay, before I get to what you have to do, or sorry, Israel needs to do what it has to do, how important is the response from the rest of the world in contrast to the countries that I just mentioned, the international support you're receiving from places like the United States, from France, from England, and from Australia?
I cannot start to tell you how encouraging this is. Extremely encouraging, really, extremely encouraging. We had a tough night. I believe most Israelis didn't sleep tonight. Yet, from previous experience, I can say that the moment that the fighting is transferred to the other side and people are getting killed in the other side, international arena tends to forget the context, tends to forget who is responsible for the cost of lives here on both sides. And it's terrorist organizations that started this war, and it's terrorist organizations that are using their own people as human shields, as today the anti-tank missile that was launched from a school inside Lebanon. This is what we are facing. And in order to defend our people, we will have to target rockets that are being launched from populated areas to populated areas. We will have to hunt these Hamas terrorists that kidnapped 100 Israeli citizens and soldiers into Gaza. We cannot just, do nothing just because they are using their own populations as human shield. And I truly hope that the support we are gaining now will not disappear after we will finish dying here. The support should be an understanding not only when we are getting killed, but also when we are defending ourselves. And at a point, this is going to be the situation. We will defend ourselves. We are now burying the dead, but we will defend ourselves.
This was a point I made in my editorial along those lines exactly, but there's been calls for restraint from even government figures here in Australia and around the world. Now, you've belled the cat that Iran is behind this. This is an invasion of Israel with Iran's tentacles all over it. An escalation in a global view would mean Israel would be striking against Iran. How likely do you think that is?
I don't know if Israel will attack in Iran, but Iran, with its proxies, its presence on our borders, not from yesterday. I live next to the Lebanese border. I'm there every day. And I can tell you, I've been watching Hezbollah building military position in the UN area of operation in the past 2 years, while the UN force there is doing nothing against them. I've been watching the military operatives of Hezbollah watching me with binoculars. So we are the Western Front with Iran. This is not a threat against Israel. This is a threat against our values as free countries. And I want everybody to remember that.
Yes, Sarit, I had the same experience on the Lebanon border. From the Israeli side, I could see a UN compound flying a Hezbollah flag, even though Hezbollah had been a proscribed terrorist organisation. This has been concealed from the world quite deliberately, by the forces who seem to be united against Israel, which is a tragedy. What do you hope comes as an end result here? Let's presume Israel defends itself. Let's presume it strikes at the militants. The conflict ceases for a period of time. What is your greatest hope as a result of this conflict now?
As a mother, first and foremost, I hope for peace. We are all, as I've said, everybody knows somebody was killed yesterday. This is one thing. And with the strategic level, I hope that our leadership, on the one hand, and international community on the other hand, and if I have a third hand, I would talk about the Arabs, all of these together will join forces to fight these radical poisoning ideologies that are not causing casualties only among Israel, but also among their own people, and also in Europe itself, and I don't know where else. It's time for us to unite around it.
Yeah, Sarit Zehavi, you're absolutely right. It is time for the world to come together and look for peaceful solutions and denounce terrorism in all its forms.